that thing going to pick up my voice?
Yeah.
Right, so here she is. I've just gone and caught her and brought her over deliberately so that you can see a few things. There are a few things that are going to be pretty important with her. One is just because she is so nervy, and she's probably not going to look at much here today, but that's because she's done a bit every day for the last week. You don't want to frighten her. It doesn't mean that you let her do whatever she wants to do, and she is inclined to be quite piggy. She is inclined to bite you. So these are things that you want to not create a drama out of. But you don't want to frighten her. So she needs direction and she needs discipline, but you can't just flog her. Like, you'll ruin this horse if you're doing something like you're grooming her, you allow her to nip you, and then you stop and strike the animal. You'll ruin her, and she'd be likely to tear a chunk out of you or your kids, or jump all over your farrier and get a fright and overreact if you do that sort of thing. So you do not want to be doing it. All I would do if I was brushing her, and you cannot possibly do too much of this bending, so I ask her to give and then I release, and she should be happy to stay there. Right, I'm not holding her there. She's happy to stay there and she's nice and soft. You can't do too much of that, and so when you're grooming her and rubbing her down, you'd have control of her head, and you might bend her and then release there. If she goes to snatch it away or move, then I just bend her again and her hind end will go that way, like that. So she can't run off, she can't kick me, she can't do anything like that. Now, if you had her there and you had her bent and you were rubbing her, getting all this hair off that's still coming off, right there, you need to be aware, if she was sort of nuzzling me and thinking that she might like to nip, I just keep doing what I'm doing, and I might just bump her and then keep doing what I'm doing like nothing's even happened. But if you miss that opportunity and you wait until she bites you and then you stop what you're doing and strike her, you will ruin the horse. She's not trying to do the wrong thing or be bad or be savage. She's just testing the boundaries like a little kid. You don't want to flog the hell out of her and make her terrified of you being around. When you change sides, it's good practice to just put your hand on her face, right, as you change. That way she knows that you're going around, she's not going to walk through you, which she will also be inclined to do if you're not really consistent with all this stuff. So here, that hand with the coils of my lead rope up on her wither, ask for her nose to her shoulder and release. It's just little bits, I don't grab it with a death grip and drag her head around. I'm just asking her to give. So pressure, I'll wait for her to give. I don't want her to move at the minute. There, when she gives, I can release. And there. So that's the bending. As far as leading, there's two ways that she needs to lead. One is up behind like that. She's not to go past me, and she's not to be all lethargic and getting dragged along. So if I apply pressure, she needs to lengthen her stride and then I would release. If she went to go past me, I would stop and back up. She needs to be aware of my personal space. The licking and chewing is her associating the response that she's given with what I've asked for when I release. She's understanding that the release is directly connected to what she's done. So everything I'm doing with her, I want her to give. So if I could grab the cheek piece of this halter and tip her nose to me, and I want that head to come down, and I release, right? I could put my hand there and ask her to give and release when she comes down and relax. Another thing to think about is that when you're grooming her, if I was working on her head, and when you're catching her, putting a halter on or off, you shouldn't be doing anything unless she is in a neutral position. So the pole is at the wither height or lower. And if I'm working on her head, I want her nose to me and down. So if I was putting that halter on, that's the position I want her in. If I was brushing her forelock, if I was brushing her face or her ears, that's the position that I want her in. I'm not holding her there, but I can ask her to give and then I release, right? So nose to you and down, as often as possible. You can do it both ways. So if I was to go and brush her mane with a hairbrush or whatever I was doing, or even if I was going to cut it or whatever, I wouldn't be working on it if she stuck her head up in the air like this and got all stiff. So I just encourage that to be down without being a Nazi about it. I want her attention with me. I'm not doing anything with her if her attention isn't on me. So if she gets really distracted, we'll go to work and I'll stop doing this sort of thing. If she was completely distracted when you went and caught her, you wouldn't just tie her up and brush her. You'd get her thinking a little bit, or you're going to create a shit horse really quick. So they need to be paying attention. So she learns that they do get to really enjoy having their mane brushed. She's no different. They get to understand that the only place they're going to get that comfort is when their head is in a neutral position, right? So that's all I need. She is going to have a limited attention span. So you need to not be unreasonable with what you're expecting. Right. So that's leading up behind. I'll just show you a bit more. So I won't take a death grip on her, but if I apply pressure and she resists, I will hold that pressure until she gives me something, and then I will release immediately like that. See how she's aware of my body position. The slack barely comes out of that halter rope. So that's leading up behind. Gets a fright about things, you will notice that I don't take a big deal out of it. I didn't mean her any harm. The only way for her to just relax and realise that it's not a big deal is if you stay smooth and fluent and don't make it a big deal. If you stop and start and you're erratic, she will be erratic. So I'll show you from this side because she probably ain't never been led from this side before by the way she went. So she can also lead at the shoulder. If we're doing that, she doesn't move until I ask her to move, but she moves before I move. So here we want to depart, straighten my arm, she starts moving and then I'll start moving. If she was getting distracted by you there, I wouldn't try to hold her nose over this way because you're just making her walk on top of you. I'd lead a circle, use the coils of your rope to drive her up, again, it's pressure and release in front, so she learns that she needs to make that whole rope flat. So if I want her to speed up, straighten my arm. If that doesn't get a response, I drive her up with the coils of my rope, but it does. So there, and then release, bend your elbow. Come back through here because she sort of tried to stand on me through this little puddle. Lots of inside circles when you're leading the green one like this because the yield that you have on them is not very much. There's one there though, so you can see. We haven't really warmed her up too much yet, so this is sort of throwing her in it a little bit. But she should be able to, if she's coming forward actively, if she's coming forward actively, you raise your forearm, make yourself a brick wall here, she should be able to yield out and then you can release. That should be really soft. It should be soft here the whole time. If she was rushing forward, like she couldn't lead for shit when we started with her. So if there's resistance, she's not doing it properly, and she wasn't doing it properly. So if she is getting a little bit keen to move fast, inside circles, or stop her and back her up, you shouldn't be going along holding her the entire time. There should never be a constant pressure on her. So here, she's nice and soft. Stop and back up and release. And there's no pressure on her. That is the only way that she can possibly understand that when there is pressure, she needs to do something immediately. You see all the licking and chewing and carrying on that I was talking about? That's her understanding and digesting what's occurring and what she's giving me. We've got hind end, tip her nose, bit of energy at her hind end, release. That'll become your one rein stop and turning and riding a circle. Then we'll take her front end through, right, release, and set her back. Just encourage her that she doesn't need to rush off. Release. Alright. From here. I also don't want her thinking that just because I grab this halter rope that she needs to be in a hurry to move anywhere. So if I'd been doing a bit of the hind end stuff or whatever and moving her around, sort of as a general rule, when you're applying some sort of pressure and getting a response from the horse, it's a sensitizing exercise. You apply pressure, you get movement, and then you release. That's a sensitizing exercise. You need to be doing an equal amount of sensitizing and desensitizing exercises. So desensitizing is, this is sensitizing. I apply pressure when I get movement in the desired fashion, I release. Desensitizing is applying a different sort of pressure. If she was to, she's done a fair bit of it, so she's pretty good. If she was to move and get frightened, which she will from time to time, you must continue to do what you're doing as best you can until she stops, and then you can remove it. Otherwise, you're teaching her that when she gets frightened, running away is the answer, and that is not what you want. So she needs to understand the difference between when I am just doing things that might be scary and I don't need her to do anything, and then when I ask her to move, she needs to understand the difference have a quick mess around with this stuff. So she's seen this a few times now, and this is preparation for rugging and all that sort of thing. But anything that might frighten her, you don't go up to her face with it and scare the hell out of her and teach her to pull back. You would come in from behind the eye. If she would let me be close enough. If she wouldn't, then I'd just be here. And she'd move, but when she moved, I would direct it so that it is, I'd tip her nose towards her hind end so that she was just pivoting on her front end like that, moving that hind end around until she found a place that she could stop and realise that it wasn't hurting her. And then from there I'd lead off and I'd do that a handful of times, and then I'd just come in and touch her with it well behind the shoulder, behind the girth, behind her drive point, so that I'm not teaching her to pull back. Again, if she was freaking out and moving around, I just bend her and she can move. She can move all she likes, but it'll only be hind end around like that until she finds a place to stop. That's your one rein stop there. So working on that bending the whole time whilst we're doing this sort of thing. And you don't need to go and do this shit every day or anything like that. You don't need to do it ever really, but the principles of what I'm trying to show you. You need to also appreciate that when a horse gives laterally like that, the outside is vulnerable. So it would be silly to do this if there was a lot going on that outside. You're teaching her to resist and you're teaching her to jump on you. She may not be able to deal with it, but we make her deal with all this sort of stuff and teach her that it's not going to hurt her, but you need to not abuse that trust. So that's a big thing for a baby, to deal with that. She needs to deal with it because when she gets saddled up, that's what'll be happening. Now, I get deliberately more and more careless with this sort of thing as she gets better, but you do need to understand that you must always have control of her head. Now that she knows how to respond, if you control her head, you can control that hind end and you can control her whole body. So I don't have this halter rope super duper long. It's always only it's never any longer than where I could quickly bend it. Like I say, more and more careless as she gets better and better. I certainly didn't start this way. So that just became a desensitizing, good example of desensitizing. I'm not asking her to move, but that is quite similar. Once she was comfortable with it, round her hind end and down her sides, then you could let her look at it from the front. Again, I've got control of that head. show you a few things that she's been doing. There's the hind again. There's the front. Back up. Release. And stay in there behind her eye. You will also notice when I release, it is a complete release. You must release enough so that when her head comes back into a natural position, she doesn't catch any pressure. Basic driving exercises